So let's start with the easy thing. Other than the fact that yes, you can max out credit cards, and that can be a great way to get started on a business that's very low cost to start. So maxing out credit cards can be good because it's just between you and the bank. And as long as you're vaguely confident you can pay it back in some stage, the bank will let you keep that money for quite a long time. They'll hassle you about it, they'll tell you how much interest you owe, it's a horrendous interest rate, but it's actually pretty easy money to get. You don't have to ask for it, they give it to you with no conditions at all. So you can max out credit cards if it's right for you. It's a risk. Make sure you measure that risk before you take it. But other than that, banks are not in the business of taking risk. Banks are not where you go to get funding for an early stage high risk business. Banks want bricks and mortar as collateral for any money they provide to you. Banks don't invest, they only lend. Okay, so I've told you what I think about debt as a way to start early stage business. Banks are lenders, they want bricks and mortar as security. So banks are usually not where you go. The other thing is you don't say, I'm going to rush to the public market. Now in Australia, in a few other countries, but in Australia, you can list a company on the Australian Stock Exchange with zero revenue. You just have to get 400 shareholders, convince the stock exchange that you're going to raise $2 or $3 million in investment capital, and that you've got a valuation of $3 or $4 million before you raise the money. And they'll take most of that at your word. Because for them, you're just another customer, right? You're just going to pay them fees. So they're reasonably happy to take you on board. It's a terrible thing to do. What it does is increase your compliance cost, increase the burden of management, and gives you nothing unless you are absolutely certain you're going to be a skywriter. You're just going to end up down in microcaps. No one's going to cover you. No one of the investors in the market are going to invest in you. All the investors you have won't be able to sell their shares. They get no liquidity out of it. All right? So early listing on a market is not a good strategy for a startup company. So let's just take those guys out of the equation completely. Now we'll go back to the top of the list. Family, friends and fools. These are the people in most countries where most entrepreneurs get their first money. Family and friends. Why do they invest? They invest because they invest in you. They don't really know what you're doing. They don't really understand your market. They're not really sure that you've got anything special. But they love you. They trust you. They like you. They want to help you. So they give you a tiny bit of money, which, if they're honest, they never expect to see again. Okay? The fools are the people who are not family or friends but still give you money at that time. That's why they're called fools. So that's okay. That's a good place to go, and that's where you can get typically a few tens of thousands of dollars, and that could be all you need to get going. Really depends what you do. Then you've got some structured ways that are a little bit new. You've got accelerators, which are the 21st century version of incubators. Incubators still exist as well, but not so much. Accelerators take startups. The general rule for most accelerators around the world, first of all, they almost all exclusively focus on web and mobile app type startups. Right? I don't like calling them tech startups because tech means a whole lot of other stuff. They focus on what I call the webby stuff. Okay? Anything that can run with very low cost through the web and tries to get lots of eyeballs monetized quickly. That's what they like to focus on. That's what they're designed for. They have a 3 or 4 month program usually. It's an intensive program. At one extreme, you've got the model where there's no structure. They start off with their volunteer business mentors and the companies they've selected through a competitive process to be in their program, and they put them all into a room. It's like a big pressure cooker, see who hooks up with who, and then basically just encourage them to keep doing that all the way through the program. That's at one extreme. Very few that are totally like that. At the other extreme, there's a complete curriculum, a mini MBA, if you will. They have the mentors, but they bring in people, and they make the companies go through the formal sessions where they teach them about how to do accounting and how to have management accounts and read a set of books. They teach them about marketing strategy, they teach them about viral marketing, they teach them about everything they think they need to know. Very few of those. Most accelerators are somewhere in the middle. A little bit of formal stuff, a little bit of informal stuff, and a lot of this free mentor input, which can be good or can be bad. It depends on who the mentors are. Okay? There's a really good one here in Melbourne called the Angel Cube, And there's a new accelerator right here at the University of Melbourne called the Melbourne Accelerator Program, run out of the Faculty of Electrical and Electronic Engineering. That only started 2 months ago. So, and then there are some other accelerators in various parts of this country and around the world. So accelerators are one place to go. If you're going to do the sort of business that they work for, if you're prepared to go to whatever that location is, and if you get in. So the most famous accelerator most people have heard of is Y Combinator, and the competitor to that in the US was the Techstars model. Neither of those was the actual first accelerator, but they're the ones that are very known today. And so Angel Cube, for instance, is loosely modelled on the Techstars model. So accelerators are one place to go, and what accelerators do, by the way, is they invest a small amount of money for a small percentage of equity. So their gamble is they're going to make you investable. You're going to get investment from real investors after you graduate from the program. That's going to make you more likely to succeed because of their preparation and the quality of investors you get. Therefore, the risk they took by giving you all of this stuff for free and putting money into your program, into your business, is going to pay off. And it has paid off for some people. Very nicely. Who's heard of Sprints? Okay. Sprints was a company started in January 2010 by a group of entrepreneurs who had been failing to succeed for the last 6 years before that. At the time that they did it, they were trying to make software for restaurants. And then they sort of looked around and said, oh, there's this Groupon thing going on over in the United States. What if we did a group buying thing in Australia? So they quickly cobbled together some software and made up a group buying website, got a bit of investment from Europe, got some support from not really an accelerator, but a sort of an accelerator-like organisation in Sydney called Pollenizer, who made a small investment. 10 months later, they sold that company to Yahoo 7 for $40 million. Was it worth $40 million? Almost certainly not. Has it been a successful acquisition? Probably not. But Pollenizer made out really, really well by giving some free advice and taking a small percentage of equity in return. That's what the accelerators are trying to do. Crowdfunding. Who's heard of crowdfunding? Lots of people. Good. Can you raise investment capital with crowdfunding? Yes or no? Who says yes?
Not in Australia.
Okay. Okay. You can't raise equity-based crowdfunding anywhere in the world today, legally, except about 3 countries in Europe. The law in the US says that you can, but they haven't figured out how to regulate it yet. So they passed that law beginning of this year. They predict that it's going to take them 12 or 18 months to figure out how to regulate it before anyone can actually do it. So crowdfunding is predominantly, if you're looking at actual money, is predominantly pre-purchase. So it's pretty good. You don't give up any equity in crowdfunding. All you have to do is promise something. And if you do a good enough job of promising and a good enough job of marketing, you can raise a lot of money. And there are all these wonderful stories of companies who went out to raise $10,000 and raised $2 million. Of course, that means that they've raised $2 million of pre-orders they're going to have to fulfill. So you have to be very careful how you structure your crowdfunding proposition. If you're going to sell, so there's an Australian company who's done quite well with crowdfunding who designed an iPhone holder for the car. So there isn't a really good one around. The guy was an industrial designer. He designed a better one. He came up with a cool design and he fashioned it nicely. He came up with one cool colour that would only be available to the pre-purchasers. And he put it on Kickstarter, which is one of the main crowdfunding sites. Be aware, if you want to use Kickstarter, you have to be an American company. It's an American business, and they only use American companies. But that's okay, you can set up an American company quite easily. And he sold, I can't remember, he sold 10, 20, 30 times what he originally thought he was going to do. But if he was selling one of those things for a $50 contribution, one has to assume his total cost delivered to you was going to be substantially less, say $15. And that the rest of the money he could keep and use to grow the business. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. You end up selling a whole lot of product and you don't have any money. So crowdfunding is a good option if you've got something that you can pre-sell and if you're really good at marketing, because the platform doesn't market for you. The platform is just a platform. You put something on Kickstarter, sit back and wait for the money to roll in, you won't get a cent. people who succeed are people who have really, really good marketing programs. Usually that includes a really compelling video that can get lots of views on YouTube. So they're good places to go, accelerators and crowdfunding and revenue and grants. So revenue, of course, is probably the best way to fund your business. Just start selling whatever it is you're selling and make money. Then you don't need anybody else. So organic, bootstrap, whatever you want to call it, building revenue is a great way to fund your business. And before you say, oh, I've got to get all this investment first, stop and think about whether you really do. A lot of businesses actually don't need investment. You might feel like you could grow at 10 times the pace if you got the investment, but it comes at a cost. So just consider the revenue. Grants is the other thing. As I said, I work in the grant world now. So my role as a case manager is to give guidance to people who apply for grants, and then if you get the grant, you get your case manager as a free business advisor while you've got the grant. So everyone who I advise on getting a grant, who gets a grant, gets me poking my nose into their business while they're getting the grant funding. So far, I think you're mostly happy about that. So grants are a good way to go, but grants are very uncertain, they're very competitive, so they should be an option. Grant should be something that you do as well as everything else that you do. By the way, most grants, certainly the grants we work with, are all matched funding grants. So you have to have money to get money. Okay? So that's, again, but you can go to investors and say, if you promise me $100,000, I'll go and see if I can get a grant. If I get a grant for $100,000, then the company gets $200,000, but only $100,000 of equity. So you and the investors get a really good deal. Because you get more money and less equity dilution. So with Commercialisation Australia, it starts at $50,000, and you only have to have $12,500 to get the smallest grant. So that's a 4-to-1 leverage. That's pretty good. But that's only that one. All the other grants are 1-for-1, and they go from $50,000 all the way up to $2 million. So if you can find someone who's got $2 million, you can have a $4 million project. So they're all reasonable things to do, but let's just set them aside for now, because their crowdfunding and revenue and grants probably aren't where you're going to get your money if you're thinking about investment. So what about the others? You've got strategic investors. Who is a strategic investor? A strategic investor is somebody who invests money in your business for equity or not for equity, because if your business succeeds, their business will succeed even more. Good example, I was talking to one of my companies today. They're a partner with Microsoft. Microsoft has just told them that Microsoft is going to contribute some thousands of dollars to their marketing budget to help them succeed. Why? Because they've built their entire product in the Microsoft universe. It's using all Microsoft technologies. So if they succeed, first of all, if they succeed, they're going to use a lot more of the Azure cloud, the Microsoft cloud. So they're going to pay a lot more fees to Microsoft for using the cloud. And there'll be a great story for Microsoft to promote other people to come and use Microsoft products. So Microsoft is making a strategic investment in this company, because if this company succeeds, Microsoft succeeds. So that's what strategic investors do, right? They generally only do that when you've pretty much got everything but profit. Okay? They're not, a strategic investor is not a risk taker. They're a measured expense. They say, okay, you've already got a business, you've already got customers, I can see how you make a profit, you haven't actually got to profit yet, but I can see how it's all going to work. So you basically have a sound, strong business that's going in the marketplace. I'll just give it a little kick in the pants, because if it works bigger, I get a benefit out of it. The other beauty of strategic investors when they invest in equity is they often become your exit partner. Like in the case of the guy that I'm talking about, Microsoft are never going to buy him because the application he delivers is not something Microsoft wants to own, unless their Great Plains division decides it wants to buy it, because it would work in that product suite. Right? But right now that's a long way down the track for him, so we discussed it and set it aside. The other people to talk about here are private investors, private investors and private equity or family office. Private investors are those private people who somehow end up making an investment in your business. Partner of a law firm whose daughter's boyfriend comes along with a great business and he sort of goes, okay, does a good job of looking at it, sort of gets enthused about it, says, okay, I'll tip some money in. Or a high net worth individual who's made all their money in property or a member of a family office or a private equity firm. These people are not in the business of building a portfolio of early stage investments. They make an early stage investment in an ad hoc, incidental way. It doesn't mean they're not good at doing it, it just means that it's not what they're in the business of doing. So again, they don't do early stage risk investments. They look for something a little bit more solid because they don't really understand what it's all about. So they want to see enough of something they can relate to. So they want to see business. They show me some books that show me revenue and expenses and how the profit's going to actually happen. Show me customers, show me partners, channels to market, things that they can understand in a generic business sense. That's what those sorts of investors will generally look for. And those sorts of investors are generally passive. Well, that's not, well, yes, most of them are passive, but let's give them credit and say that they'll be reactive. Reactive investors are when that girl's boyfriend took the money from the partner in the law firm, and then 6 months later, he's got a little bit of a problem that he thinks he needs some legal advice on, and he can't afford it. So he goes to his investor, the lawyer. He says, look, I was just wondering if you could just give me a little bit of guidance. I know you can't give me official advice. Can you give me a bit of guidance? The guy will leap at the chance. Why? Because he's put his money into the company. So he'll leap at the chance and go, yeah, sure, let's have a coffee, let's sit down, let's talk about it. He'll give him some advice. And then he'll go back to his everyday business of being a lawyer. And he'll forget about that until the next time. That's a reactive investor, and there's nothing wrong with that. So when I said earlier, think about what investors you want. You've got passive investors, they give you the money, they go away, and they wait for you to make a prediction. Right? You've got reactive investors. They're people who give you the money and go away, but if you ask them something, will respond. And then you've got proactive investors. And that's the next group, that's the angels that we're going to talk about. So we take those other guys, the strategics and the privates and the equity and the family office, we'll take them out. So all the great outcomes are possibilities, but they're really not likely to be a more early stage investor. So now we're left with venture capital. Venture capital is the famous name. Everybody wants to get VC investment. First of all, it's very, very hard. VC investment is a bottleneck in the life cycle of investment. A very, very narrow bottleneck because only a very few businesses are of the right shape and type for a VC-style investment. Now, as most of you probably know, VC doesn't work in Australia. Well, that's not entirely true. Venture capital properly executed in Australia works very well. I can say that because I am a business partner who ran a venture capital fund and delivered a very good return. 8 times our investors' money in 5 years. However, the institutional venture capital firms that you will encounter in Australia are not run well and do not make money. They are all losing money hand over fist. The institutions are not giving them any more money. Hopefully the government will not give them any more money, although the government's already poured huge amounts of money into the sector to try and make it work. But venture capital does work. It does work in the United States, although even there, they have a big debate going on. Many of the traditional name firms are not doing nearly as well now as they once did. Some people say that's generational. They're not in touch with the current way of doing business. There are other famous firms who are still doing really, really well. But in venture capital, even in the United States, so venture capital works really well in California, Boston, New York, Israel, and London. And you'll notice I said cities, not countries, except for Israel. Because it's actually very localized. Venture capital in the Midwest of the United States looks like venture capital in Canada, looks like venture capital in Australia, looks like venture capital in Malaysia, looks like venture capital in Thailand. It's all the same. The wrong people doing the wrong job and losing money hand over fist. So venture capital is an opportunity. It's usually not the first investment in your company though. That's the other thing. Venture capitalists usually have large amounts of money. They need to put large chunks of money to work. That's how the model is designed. Again, this is about understanding your investor. So at another time, if you really want me to, I can explain the whole venture capital model and how it really works and what the key drivers are. But it's at best a limited opportunity. So in Australia, just to be very clear, this is the industry data up until last year, so we don't have the 2012 data yet. But I can tell you it's a constant declining curve for venture capital in Australia. According to the industry body in Australia, there are about 30 institutionally backed venture capital firms in Australia. Of those, 5 have money to invest. 2 of those are life science specialists. So if you're not a life science company, they're out of there. Of the remaining 3, they're generalists. Sorry, one is a clean tech venture fund. So if you're not in clean tech, you can't take money from them. So now you're down to 2, and those are 2 very small funds. One which is half invested and one which is a quarter invested. So you're really looking at competing with all the other people who want VC in Australia to get money from those 2 funds. Right? So very, very narrow bottleneck in the cycle. So let's just set venture capital aside. That leaves us with angel investors. Angel investors, I'll talk about the definition in just a moment, but they can offer you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe up to millions, but unlikely millions in one lump. Why? Because angel investors like to be very capital efficient. They'd rather give you $200,000 now and have you double the value of your business and then buy a smaller chunk of your business for the next $200,000 rather than giving you the $400,000 up front and have you lose it all. Right? So it's about understanding early stage business. So it's important to understand early stage investors actually want your business to increase in value. That is a good reason to reinvest in your business. A lot of entrepreneurs come to me and say, oh, but if I do that, you won't want to invest in it, you won't get enough. What are you talking about? If you're succeeding, that's the course that you want to back. The one that's running out the front, running really fast. So